Good morning, everyone. Jenny Foley here. I just wanted to take a few moments and share my story, at least parts of it, maybe the whole thing, I'm not entirely sure, with you to encourage at least one person to let them know that they're not stuck where they're at. January 27th, 2015 was a life-changing day for me. It's one in which I found myself at the altar, surrendered to God, and I had no idea at that moment really what was going to happen. I openly, and I say openly because it goes back to my childhood. I can remember it going back as far as 6 years old. But I openly lived a homosexual lifestyle for 17 and a half years. Often, and for a large part of that time, thought I was a man trapped in a woman's body, walk like a man, talk like a man, even thought like a man. Everything about me was masculine. There was not a lot of feminine qualities left in me. And I believe in large part that's because the Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. So my heart was convinced that I was a man. So I began to transition almost naturally. I don't really know how to describe it, but there were things that would occur. The emotions were not feminine emotions. I mean, it was just insane. But I was at this point, and I was living in West Palm Beach, Florida at the time that I came in to visit my family and got saved, which was a dream for me. I don't like cold weather. I love the beach. I was engaged to be married, and we were right around that time frame which gay marriage was about to be legalized. So everything appeared to be going great for me from the outside. But what most people do not know, not even the person that I was engaged with, no one knew the torment that was going on the inside of me mentally. All my life, for the most part, I struggled with depression and anxiety and was always on some type of medication. And almost always abused that medication for more than what it was prescribed to be. And I wouldn't just orally take it. I would do whatever I needed to use it. I drank almost all the time. Got to the point that the prescription medication no longer worked. So I began to buy things. And at the end, probably for the last year and a half, 2 years, maybe a little longer than that, I don't recall exactly, I had a cocaine problem. That's what sustained me. And no one knew the things that were going on with me. When I was in Florida, as soon as I would get off work, I would have to stop at the corner store because I couldn't make it the 15 minutes home to the liquor that I had at home. So I had to stop at the corner store and get 240s for the drive home because the mental anguish was so much that I didn't want to be in my emotions. I didn't want to think. I wanted to escape everything, and that's the only thing I could find to deal with it. I was fully functioning in everything that I did, and nobody knew. There were times that I would get a razor blade and I would cut my body, always usually on my stomach because I wanted to keep it hid from my mother. I never wanted my mother to know the things that I was going through because I could never put her through that. But I would cut my body because that physical pain released some of the mental anguish. Not everyone, no one actually understood the pain that I had to deal with because I didn't understand a lot of things. There was some physical abuse that had occurred in my childhood. There was some things that had occurred when I was in college that just, it was hard to deal with. And I never realized that what I was doing was a demonic attack, like it was demonic influence. I really didn't know that. I just thought that's the way that I was. So I lived this lifestyle, which on the outside looked like it was perfect, but on the inside I was dying. And I remember I flew in from West Palm Beach, Florida for a week to visit my family. I hadn't seen them in a year, and that's the longest I'd ever gone without seeing them, especially my girls. So I came in to visit them, and on Tuesday, I came in on a Monday, and Tuesday Mom had a church service, and I don't care how old I am, when I'm in Mom's house, I'm going to go to church. It's easier to go to church than it is to deal with the wrath of my mother. So I go to church, and during the service, I was wedged in between my mom and dad, which was odd. I'm never wedged in between mom and dad, but I was wedged there, and music has always been a gateway for me. It's always been a happy place. There was always a theme for whatever mood I was in. There was music to help me stay there, help me get out of there, whatever I wanted. So praise and worship has always been hard for me to sit through. But that night, I remember I just kept looking around and finding ways to keep myself occupied. And I did. Praise and worship was over, and I thought, well, we're good, because I don't care who the message was being brought by, who preached. It was never going to affect me. It never did. But I didn't realize that the teens that night, I believe it was the teens, were going to perform a drama to the song Completely by Among the Thirsty. And if you haven't heard it, I recommend you go listen to it, because it's essentially about just surrendering everything you are and becoming His, laying it all at His feet and saying, God, whatever it is you have for me, here, let me give you what I have and pick up what it is you have for me. I give you everything that I am, all the pain that I've caused others. I just surrender everything over to you. And I remember I began to feel what I call the pure, raw, intense, reckless, ridiculous love of Jesus began to pull me. And I began to try to barter with God. That's never a wise move, but I did. And I thought that we were through a certain portion of the song, and I call it a force, I don't know how to describe it, it was still pulling at me, and it was like it was pulling me up out of my seat, but yet my flesh and my soul and all the demonic influence that I was under was holding me in my seat. And I said, God, if it says these particular words one more time, I'll get up. And of course, those were the next words that the song said. So I remember trying to stand up out of my seat. Most people that I was going to run to the bathroom, they didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what I was doing, I'll be honest. And I began to try to walk towards the altar, because we were probably at least 3/4 of the way back in the sanctuary. So it was a decent little walk. But there was a force that was pulling me backwards. And those that were there and remember seeing it said it looked like I was a zombie walking, because I was hunched over, and there were chains, literally chains that were wrapped around my entire body that were pulling me backwards. But yet there was Jesus at the altar with His arms wide open. And I remember at one point saying, God, I can't do this. I can't even get to the altar. How am I going to do this? And He said, just come on. Come on. And I kept walking, and once I got to the front row, to the pews of the church, the chains fell off, and the momentum that I had, because I was literally pulling with everything I had in my body to get me to go, that momentum sent me flying headfirst into the altar. What transpired after that, I really don't know, other than I'm going to say we were there for at least 45 minutes. It felt like an eternity, but yet it wasn't, because the arms of Jesus wrapped around me. And I remember there were several conversations that we had, and a lot of it was me just crying. That's all I could do, because His love was more than enough for me. His love kept me. His love is ridiculous and reckless, and regardless of how bad I had been in my life, and trust me, I was bad, He was still there for me. He said, welcome home, baby. And I remember saying, oh God, I'm not gay. And He said, no, baby girl, you're not. You were made in my image. And so from that moment forward, I knew that I was His daughter. But that doesn't mean the road was easy. I still had the woman that I was engaged to back in Florida. I still had to go to Florida at the end of the week and live the lifestyle that I'd built there. And I didn't know how that was going to transpire. But God is faithful. He's so faithful. He helped destroy the relationship that I was in. The evil that was involved in everything that I was involved in was still present. And I still had to learn how to deal with that mental anguish. And I remember, I got saved in January. In February, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to fight. I know that I wasn't born that way, that's not how God made me, that I am who He made me to be, and that's His daughter. But I did not know how to fight. I didn't know how to battle. I didn't know how to make it all stop. So I tried to commit suicide yet again. It wasn't the first time, but it was the last. every time I remember trying to commit suicide, I would always try to overdose. That was my means of going out of this world. I don't know why, but it was. I would always wake up the next morning like I hadn't taken anything at all. And I took enough to more than do the job. But I remember trying to commit suicide one more time. But at that point, I knew that hell was real. And that my eyes had been opened. But I didn't know how to fight. So needless to say, I woke up the next morning like nothing had transpired. I repented. Asked God to help get me out of the situations I was in and to help teach me how to fight. So in March, I flew back to Kentucky. Was baptized. Flew back to Florida. And I knew at this point that I had to get out of that situation. I didn't know how. I didn't know how it was going to work. The economy in Florida was much better than the economy in Kentucky. The job I had was an amazing job. I didn't want to leave it because I knew that my salary would be cut in at least half. So God began to work. All it took was, and my sister-in-law said it to me, she said, have you ever thought that maybe you just need to step out in faith? And I thought, wow, that's probably a good idea. So I began to put in my notice for work. They tried to hire 2 people to fulfill my spot. Neither person worked out. And eventually at the end, they said, Jen, would you consider working remotely from Kentucky for us? And mind you, nobody else in this company got to work from home in Florida. They all had to come to the office. But yet they were asking me to work remotely from Kentucky. Same salary, all benefits, nothing changed. And this job lasted me for the first 2 years I was in Kentucky. And then God closed that door and he told me not to worry, that he had something else for me. And he did. But during that 2-year period, it allotted me the ability to, if I needed to deal with something, if there was something that needed to come out of me, it allowed me the ability to go to my prayer closet and spend time with Jesus on a regular basis. It gave me that time to just spend in his presence without having to worry about anybody else being around or thinking about this or that. It was just me and him all day, every day. And it was phenomenal. He worked me through a lot of things that were going on in my life that I didn't even know how to deal with. Even after I got saved and set free from the homosexuality, the addiction, the alcoholism, and everything else that I had going on, I still dealt with anxiety. And I was still taking prescription drugs for anxiety. And I remember at one point I was having a panic attack. And he said, and I grabbed my bottle and I was going to take a pill. And he said, you have never in your adult life been able to handle your emotions. And I said, wow, I haven't. I don't know what to do. Nobody teaches this stuff. What do I do? He said, do you trust me? And I have no reason not to trust God. He proved to me who he was in our very first encounter. I know he's faithful and I know there's absolutely nothing he can't do. And I said, yes, Lord. He said, go flush him. So from that moment forward, I've been free from anxiety, free from depression, free from everything that haunted me for all those years. Even nicotine. He set me free instantaneously from nicotine. And I smoked the equivalent of about 4.5 packs of cigarettes a day. And when he set me free, there was not one craving. There was not one headache. There was not, I didn't get nauseous. I did eat a little bit more, but there was nothing that normally transpires when you come off something. I didn't have the side effects of anything, withdrawals from anything. All I had was him. And he was more than enough. He's always more than enough. His grace is always sufficient regardless of the circumstance. So we began to work through more issues. He began to show me all the wounds that I had, I'm going to call them soulish wounds, that I had had from people who had hurt me or from whatever it may have been that transpired as a child or through my teenage years. And I had Band-Aids covered myself in Band-Aids. And I was trying to allow him to heal those wounds, but I would pull them back, the Band-Aid, just a little bit, because it hurts sometimes when you take a Band-Aid off. So I would pull it back a little bit and stop. And I remember him saying, again, are you going to trust me? Do you want this your way or my way? And I said, Lord, I always want it your way, because my way obviously is the wrong way most of the time. I get myself in trouble. So I stopped what I was doing, and he began to show me that he would rip the Band-Aid off, and his hand would go over this gaping hole, whatever the wound was, wherever it was. It would go over, and immediately it was healed. There were no scars. There was nothing. So he set me free and healed me from so much that I don't even know how I would begin to go through everything that he has done for me in these last 4 years. But I want whoever watches this to know, regardless of your situation, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of your background, regardless of where you're located, regardless of anything you think might be stopping him, all it takes is a yes, Lord. All it takes is a posture of surrender. All it takes is obedience. And he will begin to move on your behalf in ways that blow your mind, because they blow my mind. He's still done things for me and still doing things for me and maneuvering in ways that absolutely, he places me in positions that I'm like, I am so unworthy to be here at this table with these soldiers of the Lord. But yet here I am in their midst, and it's just amazing what he does and where he places me. I even at one point allowed the enemy to convince me to stop sharing my testimony, and here's why. Because some people, mostly women, who don't understand deliverance and don't understand really how all this works, when they hear that I used to live a homosexual lifestyle, and that I used to think I was a man, and that I was attracted to women, and all that good stuff that my story comes with, they immediately begin to look at me differently. They don't want to be around me. They don't want to associate with me because they're afraid that I'm going to look at them inappropriately or whatever the situation may be. So I shut up for a little while because I'm like, God, I don't want people to look at me differently because I'm set free. I mean, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. But it's true. It happens. It's happened on more than one occasion. It's actually happened so many times it's crazy. But they do that. So I allowed the enemy to shut me up. And one day God said, how long are you going to be quiet? I said, till you tell me to speak. He said, I didn't tell you to shut up. And I had to repent again for allowing the enemy. And that just shows how easy it is to allow the enemy to manipulate your mind sometimes. We don't understand the battle that goes on up here. And once it goes from your mind to your heart, that's when serious trouble comes in. So if we learn how to fight those things in the beginning, if we learn how to put on and keep on our armor, if we learn how to keep our mind protected, if we understand that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, and that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, even though we are fleshly bodies, we begin to understand how to fight, how to maneuver through life, how to be who it is God has called us to be. So I strongly feel that it's so important that we understand our true identity. And I mean our true identity, not a religious identity. Your kingdom identity. Religion will teach you a little bit about a relationship. We're his daughter, we're his son, we're God's son or daughter. The basic, but when you learn your kingdom identity, when you understand, Jesus told us to love the Lord thy God above all things, and then to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. But if we love God with everything we are and everything we even think we are, then everything else just begins to flow out of that. It begins to open up new revelation and new understanding, because if we love God in the manner that Jesus tells us to love him, we're walking in communion. Communion is the combining of two things until they become one. So no one would know where Jenny Foley starts and Jesus ends. It's all just, we're one. And when we do that, we begin to take on his characteristics. The characteristics of God. We begin to walk in the power and the authority that Jesus did when he was on this earth, because he gave everything to us, but we have to understand who we are and what we carry on the inside of us, which is more than what religion will teach you. My prayer is this, that if there is anyone that is struggling with any measure of perversion, any form of deception from the enemy, because it all goes back to deception, anxiety, depression, addiction. And listen, I don't believe that you're a recovering addict. Once you get set free, you are set free, and you no longer identify with your past. You're a child of God who knows who they are. But if anyone is struggling with anything, know that there is hope. Know that there is peace, there is joy, there is abundance in Jesus. You just have to surrender. Now, it's going to cost you some things. You're going to have to move away from the people that you're around sometimes. And not in all cases, but most cases. Mine, I had to. I would not have survived there. It's going to cost your flesh a whole lot. But I can tell you right now, everything that I have been through, every ounce of pain, every ounce of giving up, whatever it may have been that I had that I didn't want to give up, God has replaced it all with something twice as great, if not more, than what I originally had and let go of. All you need to do is surrender. If we can understand deliverance and discipleship and how they work together, then everything else just falls into place. I pray that everyone, even those that are already saved, if you're struggling with anything, or if you don't truly know who you are in Christ, that you begin to understand your true identity. Research your true identity. Research the character of God. Because once you understand that and you begin to get rid of all the junk you carry that you don't need to be carrying, everything just falls into place. I said that this was going to be quick, but it turned out to be a little longer than I intended. But I just want you guys to know that there is freedom, complete freedom. There is not a residue, no residue or not an ounce of anything of my past left on me. I no longer look at anything the way I used to. When I say I've been set free, I mean I've been set free. I am a daughter of God, and nothing else matters. I love you guys. Be blessed. Have an amazing Sunday.